Hey, what's up? It's Steve. My channel is Sign Picker and I collect traffic signs. Today, I'm going to go through my entire collection and pull out some signs within the regulatory category. For those of you who are new to my videos, I will go through hundreds of street signs in my collection within a specific category or subcategory. I will pull those signs out, talk about where I got them, what's the history of that sign, whether or not it's still used, if it's still compliant, etc. And then I will flip through all of those signs and update my sign wall to that theme. One of my viewers recently requested that I feature all of my regulatory signs. So what I do from there, I go to what's known as the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's a document that's hundreds and hundreds of pages that governs all of the street signs and traffic control in the United States. Section 2 of the manual is the regulatory category, and there are multiple subcategories within regulatory, 144 pages governing the use of regulatory signs in the United States. Now, the most common regulatory sign is the stop sign. The second most common regulatory sign is probably the yield sign, but by and large, beyond that, most regulatory signs are either square or rectangle, and they are black text, black border, on a white background. But some regulatory signs have other colors as well, and that's what we're going to dig into. Specifically within the two subcategories of regulatory known as lane control and selective exclusion. Now, the manual defines regulatory signs as being used to inform road users of selected traffic laws or regulations and to indicate the applicability of the legal requirements. What does all that mean? We're going to get into that with some very specific examples. Now, one of the questions I get all the time is, where do you get all your street signs? Another way of putting that question is, do you steal all of your street signs? The answer is no. When we go through this collection, I'm going to pull stuff out that's decommissioned because it doesn't meet the required standards for reflective sheeting, or it doesn't meet the requirements of the design, or it's just an outdated design that's not used anymore. I'm going to call all of those out. So let's see what we can find. All right, jumping in right over here. I know I'm going to have some old decommissioned lane control signs here. So let me move these out. I want to push them up here so I don't get my fingers slammed. There are hundreds of pounds of street signs right in each one of these sections. So I'll start flipping through. If this is the first time you're watching one of my videos, I'm just going to flip through these signs here and see if I can find anything related to lane control. Okay, here is one that is decommissioned. This sign was a supplement to the current standard no right turn sign, which I have one in here we'll get to in just a second, but it's a square with a red circle and a right arrow on it. Back in, I want to say 1971, when that sign was first introduced, it was a symbol-only based sign, and to ensure that motorists could interpret the meaning of that brand new sign, and this is often the case when a new sign is introduced, they will oftentimes supplement that sign with a plaque like this. So you'll have a sign that is iconography based at the top, and then the worded meaning of that sign right at the bottom. And then after a time, once it is determined that motorists can understand the meaning of that new symbol-based sign, this sign will then be decommissioned. And that's exactly what happened with this no right turn sign here. And actually, let me just jump to it now. Here it is right here. This is the no right turn sign, symbol-based icon sign that other sign would have accompanied when this sign was first introduced. So it would be posted a little something like that. I'm not exactly sure if these are the two that went together, but it's pretty close. I went and got these from the same street department, and you could see that the reflective sheeting is weathered, looks about the same yellow tint to it that used to be white. These signs are probably 40 to 50 years old, so definitely not up to current standard. And prior to the introduction of the square, no right turn, icon-based sign, and the supplemental plaque, we had a sign that looked like this. So it's totally word-based, but it's vertically oriented as opposed to the supplemental plaque, which goes this way. You had a no right turn and a no left turn. Both of those versions are no longer used and are decommissioned in the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Right behind it is a no left turn sign. So the counterpart of the no right turn sign. Font style on this no left turn sign is actually not compliant. This is the compliant version. The city of South Bend, which is where this sign came from, South Bend, Indiana, went a little rogue on the type treatment of that sign, made an executive decision which you're really not supposed to do. And I say that it is the City of South Bend because on the back, you have the Property of South Bend Traffic and Lighting sticker, which is intended to note the time frame when this sign was posted, because signs typically only last 10 to 12 years. So across the top, you have squares for all the months. Down here are the years on the sides, which goes from 1990 to 1995. Actually, here on the right-hand side, it goes through 2001. So you could see how old this sign is, what era that sign is from. And then you have one square for each day of the month, going from the first day all the way to day 31. None of these are filled out or marked. A lot of times they'll poke a hole in those squares so you know which date that this sign was posted, but they didn't do that here. Anyway, decommissioned, no longer used. I've got a ton of speed limit signs in here. Lots of these warning, slow children at play. That's what makes up most of this section here. Here is another no right turn sign. This one's also from South Bend, Indiana. It's got a barcode on it down there. It doesn't have the year as the other sign did. But again, decommissioned, the reflective sheeting on here is not the current standard. The design and layout of this particular sign is not the current standard, but could make a good addition for the wall. Okay, here is a selective exclusion sign, much like that no right turn sign that I showed earlier. This is the supplemental plaque for the no truck sign back when the symbol-based no truck sign was first introduced to the public. Nowadays, you shouldn't see this sign or wouldn't see this sign standing by itself. Instead, you would see the symbol-based no truck sign, as this part has been decommissioned. We'll get to that square symbol-based no truck sign in just a second because I know I have a few of those. Here's a no left turn sign. Here's that no truck sign. Again, both of these have been decommissioned from the manual. Here are the smallest of the stop signs that I have. And again, stop signs are considered part of that regulatory category. I would say the stop sign is the ultimate sign that represents the regulatory category. And if you haven't seen my video that features all of my stop signs, make sure you check that out. Same thing with the yield sign. I would say the yield would be number 2 to stop in terms of regulatory representation. All right, here is an old, crusty no truck sign. This is today's standard in terms of design. Not at all today's standard in terms of the reflective sheeting or lack of reflective sheeting that is on this sign. This sign almost looks like it's painted, but it's pretty neat. It was probably something that was handmade by a small municipality. I can see some paint smears kind of here around the circle, but all things considered, they did an okay job. It stood the test of time for while it was posted, but of course, just based on the condition of it, when it was taken down, it probably should have been taken down a few years prior to that. Flip this guy around and he just has a nice white background, a lot of cool texture, really neat, lots of rust, lots of scratching. So we'll throw this guy up on the wall. It is a mismatch, but back when this sign was introduced around 1971, this sign would have been posted with it just for a period of time. So we give motorists the opportunity to learn what that sign means, even though it is pretty intuitive. A lot of times people don't do well with change or do well with something new. So that's where this plaque would come into place. All right, let's see what else we could get into here. Here is the same sign, but it's a little bit different design because this one comes from the City of Chicago, as is shown at the bottom. If you haven't seen my video that features all of my signs from the City of Chicago, make sure you check that out. But one of the things I talked about in that video is that Chicago kind of does its own thing. They're a big enough city, they can break the rules on the manual on uniform traffic control devices, and this sign is a really good example of that. So the manual on uniform traffic control devices shows this sign only with the truck and the red no symbol around it. It does not include any additional text like this City of Chicago sign has, over 5 tons gross weight. This is a pretty common sign in Chicago, but it is not a nationally accepted layout, design, or message as indicated in the manual. This was actually my very first no truck sign that I ever got. Picked this up at a flea market in Northwest Indiana. I think at the time it was like $15. This would have been back in the 90s sometime. As is typical from City of Chicago signs at the time, we have a white background. I would date this sign somewhere between 1972 and maybe the early 80s, somewhere along there. This is the classic way that Chicago manufactured its signs during that time period. Here is another selective exclusion sign, no motor vehicles. I briefly featured this sign in a short recently. You can check my short videos if you haven't seen that. But this sign is to be used somewhere along a bike path or a walking trail, a bike trail. It's a paved roadway that might look like a road, and just to be sure that no cars drive on it, no vehicular traffic drives on it, this sign is posted at the entryway of each segment of that trail. I'm not sure where this sign came from. It might have been Ohio, but there is a sticker down at the bottom that indicates that this sign was posted in July of 2014. I would consider this a selective exclusion sign, although it is not in the manual. Heavy trucks prohibited. It's being very specific about the type of vehicle that is not allowed on that roadway. This is a 24 by 24 square version. I also have an 18 by 24 version somewhere in here. I might have passed it up, so might go back in there and pull it out for the wall. No left turn, selective exclusion, symbol-based sign. All right, stay there. Nope, I'll pull this one out. So I don't lose my place. This one's definitely not part of the manual. Definitely not a compliant sign. I can't even recall where I got this from. I think I picked it out of a dumpster at a street department. But it is a no sign, so selective exclusion, but the car appears to be very specific. Typically with these street signs, when there's iconography, they strip that iconography down to the most simplistic of figures. And this car seems to have a bit more detail on it than you would normally expect with a selective exclusion symbol-based sign. If you compare it to the no truck sign that we have here, you can see that truck is a pretty basic truck. This car has a lot of detail, which I think is very intentional. It's got the wheels, you've got the rims, the big rims, you've got the sleek look, you've got the spoiler in the back. Kind of looks like a sports car. What I'm guessing this sign was for was to prohibit loitering of people who have really great cars that they show up in a parking lot or along a strip, show those cars off. This sign is telling you, none of that is allowed. That's the only thing I can figure. I've never seen a sign like this posted. I've never seen a sign like this in the wild, up for sale. So I knew when I saw it in the dumpster that I had to grab it. So now it's in my collection. If anybody has ever seen a sign like this posted in the wild, please drop a comment, let me know. Love to see a picture of it if you have. Since it's not compliant, I would just categorize this under that selective exclusion category. I'll pull this out for the wall. Here's probably the best shape no truck sign that I have. It's still not compliant anymore because of the reflective sheeting, but the design is the same. The design hasn't changed, so I will pull this one out. All these signs are heavy. I'm starting to lose my place. Here is another non-compliant sign. This one comes from Michigan. I really like the design of this sign. There's a lot of type on here. It's kind of a really cattywampus arrangement of the words. This is centered, but only in the space from the arrow to the border. There's an arrow in there. There's two colors on it. So a lot of neat things going on with this sign. Well, a lot of neat things for me because I collect street signs and I'm into this kind of stuff. Most people probably really don't care. But anyway, I would consider this to be a lane control sign. Another no truck sign. I don't need another no truck sign, so I'm going to keep this one in the shelves. Selective exclusion, no pedestrians. I have nothing more to say about that one. All right, moving on to this next section. Here is a non-compliant selective exclusion, no truck sign. This really doesn't predate the current symbol-based version, so it's not the supplemental plaque. I think this one was just not laid out according to the manual, but it is a more current sign. And when I say more current, this was probably from around the 2000 to 2005 era, but we'll pull him out for consideration on the wall. A lot of warning signs in here. I try to keep these categories subcategorized within each section. It's a little tougher to do than you would think. These are all warning signs here. Okay, moving on to some embossed. I don't know if I have any lane control or selective exclusion, but I've got to go through just to make sure. No, nothing there. All right, now we're going to go down into these bottom shelves. As I'm flipping through the signs, in the back over there, I do have my laptop open to the manual on traffic control devices, to the sections of signs that I'm looking for. That way I can keep looking back and referencing to make sure that I'm choosing signs that fall within the category I'm looking for, because some of those signs, there's gray area. They could be in one or the other. So I always just go by the manual to keep me in check. No lane control signs in there. I do have a lot of passing regulation signs. That's a separate section of the regulatory section of the manual on uniform traffic control devices. So definitely an idea for a future wall there. But I know I'll have some in this section here. Here's one that does qualify for lane control. Left lane must turn left. This sign, at least in terms of the design, is still used today. This particular sign that I'm holding right here would not be used today because it is far too weathered. It is yellowed. That's just based on the reflective sheeting that this sign used back in the 1970s. Now the reflective sheeting is much more durable, much more intense when headlights hit it, etc. So this sign is several years old. It has a sibling, which is right lane must turn right. Pretty sure I have one or two of those that I'll pull out for the wall as well. This is one of those signs that I'm surprised has not been redesigned to be more iconography. This sign is still used today and it is still text-based, which I find interesting. I think there might be some opportunity to look at this sign and see if we could come up with an iconography-based version of this sign. There's another left lane. There's that sibling version, right lane must turn right. A lot of warning signs in here. Spider webs. Movement prohibition. This is a no left turn, no U-turn sign, all combined into one. The reason I say there are a lot of warning signs down here, it actually makes it easier for me as I'm going through this section and trying to find out all those regulatory signs, because as I said earlier, regulatory signs are typically black type on a white background. So as soon as I'm flipping through here and I see all these yellow signs, I sort of just flip past them. I could just go by color alone, unless somebody designs something that is not compliant, which is entirely possible. I have featured many of those in my videos, but for now, this is helping me go through fast. Same thing with orange. Orange is construction, so I don't need any of that. These are all yellow signs here. Cool. All right, let's see if I can straighten some of these out. And I have these heavy-duty shelves here, but these signs are hundreds and hundreds of pounds. I am hoping that I have not exceeded the weight limit of these shelves. My biggest fear is I'll be flipping through these one day and it'll all just collapse. So if you don't hear from me after a while, please send somebody. I might be buried under a big pile of signs. Now we're getting into some lane control arrow signs. Jesus. This was the first lane control sign that I ever added to my collection back in the probably late 80s. I mean, I was young. So it was pretty cool. I knew exactly where it came from in the town that I grew up in. They've totally reconfigured this road, so the signs, lanes, as they are indicated on here, wouldn't even be relevant to how the road is now. Somebody just ran this thing over, and you could tell that based on the scrapes here, probably vehicle rubbing against the sign. What I thought was really interesting about this sign is there are holes here and here to mount the sign up to the post. Typically, you would have a big sign like this, have a hole here, 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 and here, or maybe even inset a little bit more. Definitely not a standard way to put up the sign. And you can see, and this might not even be related to sign being run over by a car, there's some bending here. That's what's going to happen when you don't secure the sign on the top and the bottom. You just secure it in the middle, it's going to bend. Same thing if you have a big sign like this and you only secure it in the center here, you're going to have some bending. It's going to end up looking like a V. I've tried to straighten this sign out, tried to drive a car over it, let it sit all day. It's just not getting any straighter than this. So anybody has any tips on how to make these signs straight, please let me know. It's going to be tough getting this one up on the shelf because the sign wall is only about a 2-inch ledge, and the way this bend is, it's going to be trying to fall forward and fall off the wall. But I love this sign, so we're going to see if we could get them up on the wall. I don't even know where to put it. I'll do it over here. Down in here, these are going to be some big lane control signs that are going to be a little challenging to get up on the wall, not so much because of their size, but more so because of the hardware that is still attached to these signs. These signs are just as they were when they were fresh off the span wire that hangs above the road. You have these heavy brackets on here, and then on the back side you have a bracket on the top and the bottom. Those are intended to keep the sign hanging straight through wind, through weather elements. Nowadays, at least here in Indiana, signs are usually attached to the span wires on the top and the bottom. I don't think this one was. I think they just threw that weight down there at the bottom to have that weight the sign down toward the street so it hangs vertically. So really that's the reason I'm not going to be able to get these signs on the wall. There is some curvature in here. That's just a result of the sign being out in the wild for so long in service. Here's another right turn only sign. Actually, scratch that. This is a right turn only sign. That one is a left turn only sign. I should know that because if you hold up your left hand, it forms an L, but I'm looking at it backwards. And it's about 90 degrees here today in the sign shop. So give me a little grace on that. Don't light up my comments. All right, I'll take care of that later. These signs here are a lot of 12 by 18 parking signs, a mix of embossed signs and flat signs that have just been getting disorganized over time. They just start getting a little crooked and unaligned. I really need to get in here and just clean this section up because it's hard to flip through. When I first put these signs in this shelf, they were really easy to flip through. I'm talking about these signs back here, not the ones I'm in now. It's just gotten harder over time. Okay, here is a regulatory sign that regulates which lane bicycles versus pedestrians should be utilizing. However, I believe this sign has been decommissioned because I cannot find its code in the 2023 version of the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So I have to do a little digging to see if it is in the decommissioned section of that manual where it lays out all the signs that are no longer being used. But for what it's worth, this one came out of the city of Houston. It's got the sticker on the back. Doesn't really look like it was posted, so it looks like it might be new old stock. Based on the fact that it is decommissioned, I'm glad that I got a version of it. That is it. I've got lane control and selective restriction, regulatory signs, just 2 sections of the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices spread all over the garage. I'm going to take down my previous wall, which was my yield sign wall. Be sure to check out that video if you haven't already. I'm going to take as many of these regulatory signs as I can. Let's see how many of those I can fit on the wall. There's the newest sign wall, all from the regulatory category of the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, specifically the subcategories of lane control and selective exclusion. Of the 24 signs that I went through, shared with you, pulled out for contenders for the wall, I was able to put that many, 10 of them, up on the wall. Yep, 10 of them. That means I have 14 still around here on the floor that I was not able to fit up on the wall. Whenever I come through with these ideas or somebody submits these ideas to me, I always need to edit down. I'm always afraid that within one particular category or subcategory that I may not have enough signs to put up on that wall Every single time I fail myself and I pull out way too many signs to go up on the wall. I probably could have done either a lane control only wall or a selective exclusion only wall. So I will definitely try to keep that in mind for the future. Speaking of the future, a couple of things. Number one, if you have any ideas of signs that you want to see me pull out of my collection, put up on the wall, if you have any questions about any of the signs that I have, please feel free to send me a message or drop a comment. Number two, if you want to keep up on all the sign walls, all the shorts, all the videos that I post, make sure that you hit subscribe. Number three, if you want even more content from my channels, make sure you head over to Instagram, head over to Facebook, head over to TikTok, follow me there. I would really appreciate it if you like and comment on my videos. That would really help me understand what kind of content that you want. It'll also help others find that content if they are interested in it. I greatly appreciate your support, and I will see you in the next video.